that most other assessments are really more inward focused. Enneagram, when you talk about your inward focus or what your motivation is for Enneagram, or strengths is what you're strong at and how you can use that. And Fascinate is one of the only ones that we know that actually focuses on how other people view you and how you show up in the world.
I absolutely love that. And there was some tagline that stood out to me on the website about exactly what you just said, that there's so many assessments where it's more self-awareness. And then even with the Enneagram, it can be very much others awareness, like how are others seeing the world? But this is really fun because it's how others are seeing you. So just one more dimension to that. And then I love the idea of putting that spin on, being influential, being fascinating. So what I know that, like the Enneagram, like so many of these other assessments, there's different styles, types. It sounds like Fascinate has archetypes. What are those archetypes? And would you be willing to give us just a quick overview? I know we're only be scratching the surface. It's when people ask me to do this with the Enneagram, I'm like, oh, there's so much to say, but the best that you can, give us a quick summary.
Okay, so Fascinate is based around 7 different advantages, and each advantage has its own language. And so what you get when you take the assessment is you get your archetype, and your archetype is comprised of your top 2 advantages. So it's your primary and secondary advantages. So just to give you an overview, so one of the first ones is innovation. That's one of the advantages. And innovation is the language of creativity. So I'll go through them real quick, and we can go into them a little bit.
Yeah.
So then we have passion. That's the second one. Passion is the language of relationships. Then we have power, and it's the language of confidence. You'll see a lot of leaders have power. And I think that was one of your top 2 as well. Prestige is the language of excellence. And then number 5 is trust, and trust is the language of stability. Then we have mystique, which is a language of listening, and alert, which is the language of details. And so when you get your Fascinate assessment, we show you your archetype, and then we show you also what your dormant is. And we can talk more about that, but basically your dormant is the way you are least likely to add to a team or add value to a team. So Fascinate says to you, you have these advantages, and these are these languages of the advantage. And when you show up with these, this is the most natural way that you show up. And this is the way you really shine and you stand out. So one of our taglines is different is better than better. Yes, different is better than better. Being better means that you're competing against someone in the same arena. But when you're different, you're taking something like your advantages and you're leaning into what those are, and you stand out because nobody else can compete with you when you're different, but you're competing with someone else when you're trying to be better. So we really lean into that, particularly when we're talking about leadership and teams and personal branding and being influential in whatever you're doing.
I'm so glad you said that, because I know that there are certain stereotypes as a business owner, as a leader in a company. And we think, okay, we have to mold into that stereotype. But it sounds like what you're saying, and what all of these assessments, including the Enneagram, shine light on are those unique strengths to lean more into, to leverage your unique personality, not trying to be somebody else, which can be really difficult and exhausting, and eventually you burn out.
Exactly. And you think about the most successful businesses, let's say an Apple. I'm an Apple fanatic.
I am too.
Apple. We buy we buy anything that they put out. I just ordered the new midnight blue MacBook Air, even though I just had one. And, I just bought one a couple of years ago, but it's about the fact that they stand out. They have something that really stands out from, say, a Microsoft or Lenovo or whatever other computer company it is, because they fascinate with the things that they stand out. A lot of people buy Apple phones, even though research, I think, has shown that Samsung actually has better technology, and they put their technology out there quicker, but people buy into the fascinating part of Apple. And that's really where Sally's research started was with branding, was with business branding. And so this can be used for personal branding, for leadership, for just if you're in your career and you really want to advance, leaning into what makes you stand out and be different is really where you want to lean into.
Yeah, and I like that it specifically shows too, like that, what did you call it? The dormant
Yes.
advantage, and like, okay, well, maybe that's not the place for you to focus
Yeah.
on. And I will say, I was laughing. I didn't see that in my initial report, which Madelyn was so kind. She's like, here, take this link real quick. So I got to end up taking my own Fascinate assessment before this. We'll talk about how you can do the same at the end. Madelyn will give us some guidance on that. But my dormant advantage was alert, which you said was the language of details.
Yes.
And I'm just, I'm laughing.
You're 7 and you don't want the details. I started saying, yeah, it showed me that. Immediately I saw that.
That is hilarious. And then I was just like, I'd love to plan an event, but I get overwhelmed with the details. That is so funny. Whenever I was writing, I know you said you were a mystic, was in one of your,
Yeah.
what was that the language of? I missed that one.
So mystique is a language of listening.
Listening. Okay. Okay. And just so listeners know, so yours was mystique, and what was the other one?
Prestige is my secondary.
Prestige.
And my archetype is the royal guard. So one of the things that you get each one of your when you take an assessment is our founder Sally, you actually get a short clip of a video telling you how you show up the best and giving you pointers on how to use your archetype, how to really step into your archetype in whatever you're doing.
Okay. Now I'm kind of putting you on the spot with this. So no worries. We can cut it, or we'll just work our way through. But do you see any similarities between the Royal Guard and that type 6 energy?
I do, particularly in mystique.
Okay.
So mystique is the language of listening. So mystique, we are people who, when we talk, people listen because they know that we've already considered all of the plans, the choices, and the options, and then we've come down to say this is the best one. So when I think about a 6 and how we prepare for things and we want things to be safe, a lot of that's strong in mystique. We listen for all of the details and we consider all of the possibilities before we speak about something, because we want to make sure we're giving you the right information. So I do see a lot of correlation with Enneagram and Fascinate. My husband is an 8 and he has a language of power. And so power, it's confidence, but power is also the people that we want to move on. They want to get something done. They want to make a decision and get it over with. They don't want to get into the details. And they're typically the ones, like you said, like I mentioned, as leaders, power people, they get in there, they make a decision, they want to lead the team, they're the first to speak up, and they want to move on. And I very much see that correlation in a lot of 8s and that power detail from Fascinate.
I can absolutely see that. Yeah. And then I do love that it gives you that archetype. So let's see, mine was the people's champion.
Yes.
What?
So passion. Let's see. What was your secondary? I know your primary was passion.
Okay, passion, and then power. I don't know that I would have guessed that, but talking about like moving on, that does feel very true for me.
So passion people, they are really about forging relationships. They react. You are people who build wide networks. You think about people socially and how people on your team are feeling. So if you think about on a group that you might have, the passion people are the people that you're social butterflies typically. So that if that doesn't correlate with a 7, what does, right?
Well, and I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Also I'm thinking, are you familiar with the Enneagram subtypes?
Yes.
Okay. I'm even thinking like, okay, that makes sense because I identify as mostly a social subtype 7. So that right there, I'm like, okay, yep, I can see that.
Yep. So passion people communicate you're the language of emotion. So when you're sort of the opposite of, say, a power person, you have power, but typically you don't see those a lot together, because passion people are really thinking about people and the emotional state of people and social. So let's think about if you have a project, the passion people are the people that you want to get your team on board, to bring everybody in, and to really get them involved and make those connections.
I love that. Okay. So I'm curious if we can maybe go through each one in just a little more detail about how somebody might apply this in the workplace or even as an entrepreneur starting their own personal brand, getting out there online more. Because again, I think people feel, and I even feel this sometimes. So I understand where it's like, oh, I need to be super confident. I need to be bubbly. I need to have strong opinions. Otherwise, like, let's not even try. But I love this because it's showing all different ways to
Yeah,
be influential and fascinating to others.
it
So,
does. And I want to add real quick
yeah,
that
please do.
so with our advantages, we all possess all seven, but the reason we give you your top two, that we really want you to focus on your top two, is because those are the ones that you have to exert the least energy to use.
Mm.
They come most naturally to you. So you might, I think your dormant was alert. You can use alert when you need to. It's just the one that you have to use the most energy in using to fascinate someone. So what happens is we get into what we call you get into your dormant because you're using too much of that dormant advantage, and that's not where you flow the best. That's not where you fascinate the most. So that's why we put that in there, is because we want you to flow, we want you to fascinate, and we want you to be naturally who you are. And there's some other pieces in there, as you said, we're just scratching the surface, but there's some other things in there that your report talks about. For instance, one of them being, as I go through these, I want you to think about this, double trouble, which is where you use too much of your primary advantages. And there's some, we actually have archetypes for those too. So let's say as a mystique, when I'm in double trouble, it's typically when I'm stressed or I have a lot of something going on and I'm using a lot of mystique. And so what happens is it's almost too much of a good thing. I get really aloof. So I take listening too far. And so I get really aloof. I go inside a lot. That introverted side of me really comes out. And I'm not being fascinating to people because I'm being aloof and I'm not talking. So I've taken that mystique that's typically a really great advantage for me and gone too far. And so our goal is, how do we keep you in the middle where you are the most fascinating? You're not going to your dormant, but you're not going into double trouble either. We want to make sure, much like Enneagram, when you're healthy and you're focused, and you're in your six, for me, a 6-wing 5, and they can go to that negative side of it. And that's what Fascinate has that as well, where we don't want you to go into your dormant, but we also don't want you to use too much of what your primary is and be in double trouble.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that because, and like you said, there's not that we can't be any of these things or all of these things. It's just the energy level and then using them with intention
Yeah.
and not over using them at times.
Yeah.
So somebody who is in the workplace, either maybe as a leader or stepping into a leadership position or maybe becoming a leader, in their online business or whatever type of practice they're starting, how might an innovation archetype become more fascinating, or should they lean into?
So innovation is a language, creativity. So these are the people that you want in on your brainstorming sessions, because they're always thinking about, how can we create something new for this problem? They love experimenting. They love to solve problems with new solutions.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love a good brainstorm session too, so I feel that a little bit. What about how can we use our passion archetype if that is one of our top ones? Which I guess we talked a little bit about that because I mentioned that was mine. But anything else to add to that for anybody else?
Yeah, so those are the people that are going to help your team forge relationships. So if it's something that you need the team to buy in on, look for a passion person on your team. They're the social butterflies. They're going to react with more warmth to other people. They're going to pull people in because that's where you land. You love people, and you love the whole process of pulling people in and loving on them, and just being that passion person.
Yes. Okay. And then we had power, which we had talked about. But anything to add to that one with the love or language of confidence?
Yes. So, power people is the language of confidence, and power people have really big goals. They typically have stronger opinions. They come into something knowing what they want, which is why you see in our Sally's research actually showed that I was really high up. I forget the percentage, maybe 80 or 90% of people in leadership in organizations, CEOs, have that power language as part of their Fascinate assessment. So they're usually really decisive and self-assured about themselves as well. So think about when you need a decision made on a team, you want to use that power and really let them step in.
Okay. And then if somebody happens to be dormant, and because I think that is, like you said, a lot of leaders are that. I see that in my Enneagram trainings. Threes, eights tend to be in those executive level positions. But somebody who's thinking or might come back as power as dormant, what should they be thinking about to maybe tap into that when they need to, or when would they need to?
You just lead in a different way. I am dormant in power. And what I lead with is more of asking questions of my team. So because I'm a mystique, that is what I'm leading more with. I don't lead with this is what we're going to do. I thought about it. I've decided. That is not the way I lead. It's much like, with Quiet in the book, Susan, I can't remember her last name. That,
Yes.
yes, when she talks about introverts being leaders, it's you lead in a different way. So you might not be the decisive leader that comes in really self-assured and leading the charge right away. You might lead with questions, or you might lead with more warmth as a passion person.
Okay, I just quickly Googled Susan Cain Quiet. That is a great book for introverts.
Yes,
Yeah.
it
And
is.
really all people to understand one another. Okay, what about prestige and that language of excellence? How do we use that in the workplace?
So that is my secondary advantage. And prestige people are always thinking about how do we get better and exceed the expectations. So prestige people they're also into details. But one of the things that we're always thinking about is we don't necessarily come up with new ideas, but how can we make something better? How can we improve something? We have a great attention to detail, and so typically we're the ones that you want looking over a proposal if you're about to submit something, because we're going to catch it and we want it to be just the way it should be. We want that perfection. So for instance, as an event planner, that came in handy for me in that prestige, because my attention to detail and wanting to make sure every I was dotted and every T was crossed for an event and every flower was in place or every centerpiece was just right. That was what my clients really hired me for. It was my attention to that detail and to really have this event that was one of excellence.
Okay, and just as you're saying that, I do find that person like fascinating who can think of all those little details, and like it's impressive and it absolutely stands out. So, just as we're going through these, I think I had like an image of like, oh, this fascinating person on a stage with like confidence, and how are we going to talk about this? But I'm loving these categories and just the different ways to kind of see this and bring attention to ways that, yes, we can fascinate outside of maybe the stereotypical ways.
Yes. Yeah.
What about, okay, the fifth one was the trust, the language of stability. How do we use that in the workplace?
So trust people are the people that they like consistency. When you look at the research, it shows that a lot of people in the financial industry are trust. So their consistency gives them an edge. They like systems that have already been proven. So they get things done. They're steady. They're focused because they are focused on what has been proven, and let's stick with that.
Okay.
So let's think about in your sales and presentations meeting, those are the people that they keep you on point on how a product has been proven to work for you in your company. they say, well, this works. Why do we need to do something else? While you might have that innovation side to say, let's just scrap it all and let's do something new. So,
It's like, oh, no. We're bring in those people, bring in those stability people.
yeah, the trust people, they keep the ship steady. When you have a team, particularly one that might be going through change, those trust people are going to keep the ship steady because they know what you need to stay focused and keep moving. And we need that balance of a team, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely need some of that in my own life. Okay. Now we talked about the mystique, the listening. Anything else to add to that for workplace application?
Yeah, so one of the things I would say about mystiques is, so our research shows that passion and power people often over communicate. Mystique people are going to under communicate because often what you'll find is we're listening and we're processing in the background. And so it's quite often, you're going to have to pull it out or wait because that immediate decision or thought on a project or whatever you're working on within your group, you're not going to get that immediately, often from a mystique, because we are thinking about the details and we're analyzing everything that might go into the details of that.
Yeah. And I don't know if this is like a sixth thing or what, but I have another good friend who identifies as an Enneagram 6. And I will say I'm constantly I don't know, impressed, maybe fascinated is the word, by her ability to observe and listen to, what some guru said about this, and then like distill it down and like really put this unique spin and opinion on it. I'm like, wow, I didn't hear that at first, but like now that you say that, that's really interesting. And so I'm always telling her, I was like, you have this superpower. I don't hear these things.
Yes. And the other thing that I think is, if you thinking about a team for a mystique, if you want a good negotiator, we typically have really good poker faces because we're not reacting, whereas a passion person or a power person might give you their reaction right away.
Yeah.
Mystiques are listening and we have really good poker faces. So you typically don't know what we're thinking. And so you think about that coworker who they do good work, but you don't know a lot about them because we don't share a lot. We're typically very much in our heads in that listening mode. And that is how we sort of boil stuff down to what the underlying issue is. So I use it a lot in my work as a strategist, listening and really guiding my clients because I use that strong mystique language with my work there.
Yeah, I think this is a great reminder, not just for ourselves, but whether we're leading a team or leading clients, customers, to be aware of these different styles, Enneagram types, different Fascinate archetypes, to tap into their strengths, because some of these are all of them, are incredibly valuable in their own way, but can, like you're saying, sometimes be overlooked unless you're asking the right questions and noticing those things, and know what to look for.
Which is why having those balances is really good on a team, right? We know that the most diverse workforces are the most profitable, the most diverse companies are the most profitable. So let's think about diversity in a really broad span and say, even the most diverse groups have the most diverse Enneagram or fascinating type. So because the more different thought processes you can get in those groups or on your teams, then the better off you're going to be because you've considered all angles of it.